Good afternoon, all. Many of you have already attended at least some of the classes that I have taken. So, as always, we should always be well prepared to prevent the infections, transmission of infection to us. So, all ICUs, the patients are supposed to be aerosol generating. So, you should have all the aerosol precautions, including the N95 face shield and coverall. Okay. And this is a timeline telling us the course. Basically, this will tell you about the infectivity period. Okay. And as you can understand, by around 10 days time, okay, 10 days time, the infectivity would come down. So you would plan procedures like tracheostomy after that, usually after 10 days. So the chances of this thing would be less. And you can also see that the non-survivors, usually they die by around 16 to 21, 27 days. This is the mortality time. And some of them would need prolonged ventilation also. And this is also a timeline, but this tells you about your treatment. And that is so nicely depicted here, because you have the antivirals being effective in the first 10 days. Usually after 10 days, we will hesitate in starting antiviral therapy. So the timeline you should always present when you are presenting cases. So you can say day 5 of illness, like that. So when it is around 12 days, you can think of anti-inflammatory. You can start them early. So methylpred and steroids may be started even early. And when you have the late pulmonary phase, you can even think of escalating the anti-inflammatory therapy. And you can see the number of patients decreasing when they reach the late pulmonary phase. Only very few are there, but this patient would have a high mortality. So we would be talking about critical care in the critical COVID patients. So any patient who who is in respiratory failure, requiring mechanical ventilation, who is in shock, or needs support of other organ systems, like a patient who is CKD needing dialysis, would be said to be a critical COVID. Okay. And can we predict beforehand whether this patient would go to the critical stage? There are different scoring systems, not well validated. One of this is called the COVID Gram Critical Illness Risk Score, which would take into consideration your age, hemoptysis, dyspnea, and also the NLR ratio, also lactate dehydrogenation, hydrogenase, and bilirubin. So this will tell you like chances of critical illness is expressed as percentage or as low, medium, and high, depending on the score. So before coming into the topic proper regarding the ventilatory support, we should know this, keep in mind this symbol diagram. Okay. You have the lung, okay, depicted as a balloon that will tell you about that representing the alveoli, or a balloon, okay, connected to the ventilator through a narrow tube. Okay. So this balloon always has a natural property to come back to its smallest volume or length. Okay. So what happens is that when you want to inflate that balloon, you should overcome that natural property, which is usually called as the elastic property or the elastance. Okay. So you should overcome the elastance. Elastance is difficult to measure and then communicate. So we use the term compliance. Compliance is just the opposite. How easily you can. Elastance was the resistance or the difficulty in inflating. Compliance is how easily you can inflate that balloon. Okay, so that is expressed in terms of compliance. Okay, when you have a ARDS, which is we have alveoli filled with proteinaceous fluid, they say that there is a less compliant lung or maybe a stiff lung. Okay, so when you want to blow this balloon up, you have to push the gases along this narrow tube. Okay, so any flow through a tube would offer resistance. Okay, so the ventilator has to do work to overcome the resistance as well as the elastance of the balloon. The resistance the tube offers, that will include the ventilator tubing, the endotracheal tube, okay, and also the elastance or elastic property of the alveoli. Okay, normally it is only 5% of the total energy expended or oxygen consumed. So very little. But as you know, when the lungs become problematic, the patient has to put in a lot of work of breathing, and that might even put burden on your heart. As you know, the most common or most dangerous thing that would happen in COVID is hypoxemia. Okay, and how can you quantify hypoxemia? So you should know the grades. Okay, so one method of quantifying is not expressing just as PO2. So you always express the PaO2 with respect to FiO2. FiO2 is the fraction of oxygen patient is getting. So if it is 40%, it would be 0.4. So percentage by 100 will give you the FiO2. Okay, that is one method of expressing. And second method is SpO2, your saturation probe. You can take the pulse oximeter probe and then divide that by the FiO2 and you get a ratio. So anything less than 315 is supposed to be showing this representative of ARDS. So that is called the Kigali's index. Okay. And then what are the causes of hypoxemia? As we know, there are ventilation perfusion disturbances. Either it could be low, okay, it could be high when you have retention of carbon dioxide. Okay, so hypoxemia causes are low V by Q. Okay, it could be due to, so low V by Q could be due to low ventilation. Okay, as well as because of a high perfusion. We'll see what that is. So this is a normal alveoli resulting getting just the enough amount of blood flow. Okay, so suppose you have 80 molecules of oxygen here, and the blood that is passing through also needs 80 molecules of oxygen. Everything seems perfect. So 80 molecules are there and blood needs 80. So this is normal. Okay. You have another scenario here, which is partially fluid filled. So the V is less. Okay, ventilation is less. So you have only 60 molecules of oxygen here and you need 80 molecules. This is low V by Q. It can be corrected to some extent by increasing the FiO2. Okay. And the third is an extreme situation where you have total collapse of the particular alveoli or a lung unit, total collapse. So there is 0 molecules of oxygen in that alveoli and the blood needs 80. This scenario is called as a true shunt. And remember, this scenario will not improve by increasing the FiO2. Some people will include low V by Q also in the term shunt, but the true shunt tells you that the alveoli are totally shut. So even 0 molecules of oxygen is there, blood needs 80. So or the second and the third would indicate low V by Q. Okay, but the third is correctly called as a true shunt. Fine. So what is the next high perfusion? We have 80 molecules of oxygen here. Because of some pathology in the regulation of your blood flow, okay, blood flow has increased and it needs 100 molecules of oxygen. The alveoli are innocent. There is no problem with the alveoli, but the blood flow has increased. So 80 is to 100. So there is high perfusion compared to your ventilation. So both can produce hypoxemia. Then diffusion impairments is very easy to understand. You have a thick alveolar capillary membrane. Usually it should be 1 cell or 2 cell thick. Okay, and this will prevent easy diffusion of oxygen into the blood. And third is your hypoventilation. Hypoventilation with respect to your alveolar ventilation, not the total ventilation, not the minute ventilation. Alveolar ventilation. So that can be because of some kind of block in the blood vessels. So consider the gases that come into this alveoli. They're not taking part in gas exchange. So that is hypoventilation, or it can be even said as dead space ventilation, and that is usually manifest as carbon dioxide retention. But extreme cases can produce hypoxemia also. Okay. So in COVID, you have ACE2 receptors which are abundant in type 2 pneumocytes, and initially you have vasodilatation. So hypoxemic pulmonary vasoconstriction is a normal phenomena where the blood vessels will vasoconstrict when the oxygen molecules are less in the alveoli. It's a normal protective mechanism to decrease the shunt or low V by Q. So that mechanism is abolished when you have COVID. Okay, so the blood flow would be in excess of the amount of oxygen there. Initially, there is anti-inflammatory, anti-angiogenic, and anti-fibrotic, and later there is fibrosis, cell proliferation, and vasoconstriction. Okay, so initial stages, it is not very similar to our classical ARDS, which we have studied, like your alveoli totally fluid filled. So initial stages might represent a vascular compartment, high perfusion compared to ventilation, and that would produce something called as happy hypoxemia, which we'll discuss in next. So hypoxemia, we talked about perfusion problem. Yes, you could have microthrombosis in your vasculature of your lung, and that would produce again hypoxemia because of your vascular problem. Here the alveolar are innocent, and you will say that it has a normal compliance, low V by Q, recruitability is less. Okay, and this is the L type which was described, but there is some controversy at present regarding the L and H type, where they say the L type is the starting stage and the H type is the final stage of ARDS. Okay, so phenotype L and phenotype H, and if you don't take care to step up your treatment according to the clinical scenario, okay, your L phenotype can progress onto your H phenotype. The progression will be hastened or fastened. And also remember, these patients would have a high respiratory drive also because of the neurotropism of this virus. So this is the pathophysiology we have been seeing this picture. Okay, so this is the typical picture where one side shows that diffuse alveolar damage. That is the term that we use in ARDS, DAD, diffuse alveolar damage. So there is fluid filling, all the inflammatory markers go into this alveoli, okay, and there is diffusion impairment, the vasculature get disrupted. Okay, so this is the typical picture of your ARDS, and this causes lot of shunts at low V by Q, and eventually result in pulmonary artery hypertension, acute cold pulmonary. Okay, let's see a simple scenario first. You have a patient who is COVID positive, and look at the history. He does not complain of breathlessness. Okay, no accessory. Work of breathing is one assessment we should make. That is more clinically. It's not just the respiratory rate. Respiratory rate is 22. Okay, no paradox. You should look for paradoxical breathing and see the saturation. Saturation is less. ABG shows your pH. This is your pH. This is your carbon dioxide. The third one would be your oxygen, and this is your bicarb. And room air. This is FiO2 is 0.21. So patient is hypoxemic. So what can we do here? We can start with oxygen therapy, either through nasal cannula, simple face mask, and definitely all the medical management. Okay. And also any patient you can try awake prone positioning also. So you can, any patient who is on oxygen therapy, you can start him on awake proning also. And the goal should be just a saturation just above 94%. But the problem here is you have to monitor the work. So very important that you have to monitor the work of breathing. Okay. And level of consciousness, as well as follow him up with ABG. Look for carbon dioxide retention. So I told you about happy hypoxemia, where the SpO2 would be low, maybe even as low as 65. Patient might not complain of any kind of dyspnea. He is happy. Okay, that is because this scenario usually results because of the initial vascular problem, vasodilatation. Okay, the alveoli are not fluid filled, so he will not feel like drowning. He's okay with his compliance, right? Respiratory rate might be normal or high. Carbon dioxide is usually have a type 1 respiratory failure would be low. So what are the options we have here? Again, oxygen. It could be right from your nasal prongs, nasal simple face mask, non-rebreathing mask. Okay, you can use NIV if you have the work of the rate is high. Okay, and you can even use NRB with flush rate is where you're just like activating the flush in your anesthesia machine. You can give very high flows in non-rebreathing mask, and after placing in nasal prongs, just try to give him more oxygen. More maximum you can give is 100%. So if you think that the NRB is not giving 100%, you can add on to the FiO2 by using 2 devices simultaneously. These patients would be happy with the oxygen and they would improve in your saturation. But here you have to monitor the work of breathing. For all patients, you have to monitor the work of breathing. Okay, that is more of clinical. You have to look for accessory muscle use. Okay, your alien assay, patient generating large tidal volumes. Okay, especially if patient is in non-invasive ventilation, you can measure the tidal volume more than 9 to 9.5 ml per kg. And you think of even to step up your treatment or to intubate when he is retaining carbon dioxide. Still not complaining of difficulty in breathing, when he is struggling to meet the demand. So all these are more of clinical and altered level of consciousness. So you can elicit stress hypoxemia. This may tell you that patient can go bad. Okay, record the baseline SpO2 and ambulate the patient for 30 to 60 seconds. Ask bathroom very simple things. Reassess the SpO2. Okay, and the drop more than 3.5 is dangerous. 3 to 5% is dangerous from your baseline SpO2. The patients could have a picture, X-ray picture like this, where you have more of peripheral consolidation, which is very typical of viral bronchopneumonia, or to the typical bilateral exudates that you can see in the H-type ARDS. Lung ultrasound, you can see consolidation, you can see B lines that would extend from the pleural line to the end of the screen. Okay, these are rocket lines. Okay, and you can also so you could have subpleural consolidation with air bronchograms that you see in ultrasound. And these are some of the findings that you can see in not for viral bronchopneumonia. Subpleural consolidation can be seen in viral bronchopneumonia, not very specific for your COVID. Okay, and there are many radiological findings. I hope that class is already over. So what are the options we have? We talked about nasal prongs, very simple device. Patient can eat, patient can talk with that. So you select that when the P/F is 200 to 300, and you should know the FiO2 because we said we have to calculate the P/F. So every 4 liter you keep, so every 1 liter you keep, the FiO2 increases by 4%. So 1 liter is 24, 2 liters is 28. Likewise, you should know the FiO2. Whereas you can think of the simple face mask. Okay, Venti mask is not usually routinely used because the aerosol generation is considered to be higher in Venti mask. So simple face mask and NRB you can use. So again, the P/F is 200 to 300. And remember, you start with 5. Don't decrease because it will add on to your dead space and patient might rebreathe. So 5 liters is the minimum that you keep in simple face mask. So every liter you add, you start from 40, 50 and 60. You increase by 10. Okay. Whereas this is the NRB, which needs higher FiO2, higher flow rates. Okay. Because you have valves that will preferentially direct the oxygen to during inspiration to the patient. Okay, and the bag would act as a reservoir of oxygen during exhalation. The patient would exhale to the outside through the unidirectional valve. So you start from 6 liters. Usually it needs 10 to 15 liters. So you can increase. You can even, some patients might even get 100% oxygen. So we'll see another patient, again COVID positive. Main difference is that workup breathing is high, is present. Accessory muscle is there, but there is no paradox. Okay. So ABG again shows almost similar values. We can try HFNC. Okay, because workup breathing is high, you have to think of not just the oxygen delivery devices, but not just the simple face mask or your nasal cannula. Think of a higher that would give some kind of PEEP. Okay. So HFNC is one such device. You can start with 40 liters and start with high FiO2s, try to attain 100% oxygen and then gradually come down on the FiO2. We'll discuss that later. So medical management, whatever your medical guidelines tell you, should start your heparin, steroids and antiviral. These are the 3 core therapy that you should never forget. Anticoagulants, steroids and antivirals. Okay, especially patients who are on HFNC. Okay, oral feeds should not forget. And convalescent plasma has a controversial study. There are a lot of studies that positive and negative. So it is maybe can be used as per our guidelines. Azithromycin, we start with low and then awake proning. Yes, here also you always think of awake proning because HFNC is not a bulky device. You can ask the patient to lie prone. It's very easy for proning patients with the HFNC rather than NIV. Again, the goals are 94%, but when you keep this equipment, you should see that the workup breathing comes down rather than going bad or staying like that. You should you should always look into the workup breathing and make sure that it is coming down. If it is not, you have to step up your treatment. So monitor workup breathing, ABG, inflammatory markers, again, very important thing, and the ROX index. So we'll see that. So this box will tell you the things that you should need for your HFNC. This is basically a heating plate device. And over that you have the chamber, which it's a heated humidifier. Okay. And you have this special flow meters. That is ideally that this should be provided with HFNC. And you actually can see two towers, two flow meters. Okay. This is the oxygen flow meter. And that is a special kind of flow meter which can deliver up to 60 liters. So some flow meters, special flow meters will deliver up to 40, but most of them should be delivering up to 60 liters per minute of oxygen. And that will consume a lot of oxygen. So you should need a lot of oxygen in your ICU when your patient is on HFNC or any COVID patient. And here, this is the tube that comes from the heated humidifier. And there's a machine that would generate pressurized gases, pressurized air with turbine. Okay. So you have a mixture of oxygen coming from here plus air from the machine. They will be mixed. Okay. And then you have the oxygen sensor measuring the oxygen that is coming out. And basically this is a heated device. So you have this tube having a inner wire also. Sometimes you might have a thermometer at this end. And you have the nasal cannula that is very easy to connect. In the second figure, you can see the patient very comfortable with the nasal cannula or catheter. Okay. And this device should be ideally used in a negative pressure room, which we rarely have. It could be used in a single room with good ventilation. And most of the time we use them in the ICU also. And we have to consider this when the P/F is 150 to 300. And the saturation is less with relatively high work of breathing. So this decides whether the patient would be happy with a simple face mask or a HFNC or NIV. So studies have shown that not in COVID, but in ARDS, people have shown that it decreases the intubation rate, especially patients having a P/F less than 200. That is the PO2 by FO2 less than 200. It has definitely decreased the intubation rate. So what are the things you should set in this HFNC? One is the flow rate. Be set in the machine. HFNC machine set in the flow rate. Okay. Temperature is also set on the machine. Okay. And third one is the oxygen flow rate in the flow meter assembly in the oxygen flow meter. So this part that would be in the wall outlet. Okay. So three things you have to set. You can't directly set the FiO2. That's the thing. So if you can set the FiO2, you can increase the FiO2 by increasing the flow rate in the oxygen flow meter. Okay. So it will tell you the temperature, it will tell you the flow rate, and it will measure the FiO2. Okay. But you can't directly set the FiO2. If you want to increase, you have to increase the flow rate in the oxygen flow meter. There are different methods by which our HFNC would help the patient. Basically, for every 10 liter, there's a PEEP of 1, provided the mouth is kept closed. Okay. So PEEP effect is there that will help in alveolar recruitment. It will decrease the dead space. It might even wash off carbon dioxide. The flows are very high. That is the most peculiar thing. That is why it's called high flow. Okay, because you are giving even 60 liters plus whatever the turbine develops. You can set high flow rates. Okay, you can set flow rates on the machine, and it improves your carbon dioxide as well as it improves your oxygenation. So coming to the aerosol generation with HFNC, they have found that it is equivalent to a simple face mask with 50 liter per minute flow. Okay, so it's not very high, but here again you have to monitor any device you use. You have to monitor the work of breathing. Look for patient comfort, respiratory rate, SpO2, flow rate. If you see that every hour you are forced to increase the flow rate because patient is not maintaining the saturation, your FiO2 can't be brought down. Okay. And patient is retaining carbon dioxide, think of going to intubation. Okay. So we start with usually 30 to 40 liters per minute. That is the flow rate that is set on the HFNC. Okay. FiO2, you can increase the flow rate in the oxygen flow meter and see what is being recorded by the machine. So you can increase the flow so that it reaches at least 90% to start with, and then gradually come down. Temperature, you have usually 3 settings, 31, 34, and 37. Usually start with 34 or 37, and I can ask the patient if it's too warm or too cold. So if it's too warm, you can come down on the temperature. So these are the things that you set, and the most important is you have to monitor the patient. Patient should improve in 1 to 2 hours time. So that's the maximum time that you give for this patient. If they are not improving or they are worsening, they are retaining carbon dioxide, better step up. So there's one index that's called ROX index. That is respiratory rate and oxygenation. That's called ROX index. Basically, it's a SpO2 by effort. We already described this is one method of expressing your hypoxemia, degree of hypoxemia, the Kegel-X index. That divided by the respiratory rate. So that is divided by the respiratory rate is your ROX index. Okay. So in ROX index, if it's more than 4.88, it's quite good. Whereas you have to consider to step up of your treatment, preferably intubation, when your ROX index is less than 3.85. And depending upon the time at which you look into the ROX index, there are different cutoffs. Mostly you have 12-hour cutoff of less than 3.85. You should think of intubation. You need not wait till 12 hours. So you can take the 2-hour this thing also. But usually we keep a cutoff of less than 3.85 as indication to intubate. Okay. Coming to the next option we have before intubation is your non-invasive ventilation, and make sure you have a cooperative patient who's not obtended, who's not unduly agitated, who tolerate the mask. Cooperative patient ആയിരിക്കണം. Interface selection is so very important. So you have to select the correct size of the mask. Ventilator selection, you can use either the ICU ventilator with the NIV mode being selected, okay, or you can use a BiPAP machine with the small one that has a single link. Only one tube would be there, one tube. And the most important and the difficult part is to have a tight fitting mask. We find it very difficult for this patient because they are, most of them, they're awake and they're distressed. They'll start pulling out the mask and it will start to leak. So when there is leak, the PEEP will not be effective, and also the aerosol generation would be much, much higher. So out of the many interfaces we have, the commonly used one here is the oro-nasal one, okay, something like this. But the one that has good evidence is your helmet. Helmet one has very good evidence to be used in COVID or any kind of ARDS. Okay. Coming to the different types of machines you might use for non-invasive as well as invasive ventilation. This is the Pakka ICU ventilator, where you have to select the NIV mode when you go for non-invasive ventilation. Okay. This has a compressor. This has the like your central processing unit or the computer. You have the CPU, something like that. That is usually having a display where you can have the knobs to adjust the ventilator settings. Okay. So if you don't have the compressor, you can take a compressed air outline from the wall outlet also. If your ICU has a wall outlet that gives you oxygen as well as compressed air, there's no need to switch on the compressor. So basically you need compressed air from either from the compressor or from the wall outlet, and you need oxygen for this to run. So you have to plug in this part, you have to plug in this part also. So this machine is again an ICU ventilator, but here this does not have a compressor. It can be used as a transport ventilator also. So here this works on turbine. It's like a fan sort of thing that that moves and then develops compressed air, pressurized gases. Okay, so here you can use a turbine instead of the compressed air or the compressor. Here also you have to select the non-invasive mode. If you have such a mode, you have to select the non-invasive mode when you are using non-invasive ventilation. Third type is your BiPAP or CPAP machine. Both look alike. And see, main difference is here, this has only a single limb. The exhale gases go out at the patient end. So we'll see what modification we should make for the circuit when you're using this thing. And for these two ventilators, we use the dual limb circuit. This is called the dual limb. So one port, inspired gases go into that, and then through the other one, the exhale gases come out, which is actually measured by the ventilator before it's expelled out. So this is called the exhale tidal volume that comes out. It's called the exhale tidal volume. And make sure you keep a filter here at this end. So to prevent the viruses coming out into the atmosphere. So you might use a HME here also, but make sure you have a bacterial and viral filter at this end, at the expiratory limb. So whenever you're using a single limb circuit, you have exhausted with your ICU ventilators, and the last option we have is a small BiPAP machine. You are forced to use that. You can use, but you have to take some precautions. Okay. So one is that you have to use a non-vented mask at the end near the. This is a non-vented, non-vented mask. Blue colored connectors are non-vented, and this is a non-vented mask. There is no hole here. Okay. And we'll see the attachment. Before this, you should also keep ready some kind of a leak valve. Okay, we'll see how it is attached. This is the leak valve that comes with the circuit. This is the leak port. Please don't close this with plaster when you're using a non-vented single limb circuit. Don't close this because you want the exhale gases to come out through this. And this part is actually an oxygen port. So some of the BiPAP machines allow you to connect the oxygen at the rear end of the machine itself. Some machines will you can connect here also. So if you want to give additional oxygen, you can take another oxygen supply and connect to here, this port. Okay. So here again, you have to closely monitor the work of breathing. And remember, if the patient is taking large tidal volume, as I've told you, to the extent of more than 9 to 9.5 ml per kg, that you can measure on the ventilator, especially when you're using a ICU ventilator. Okay, that would produce something called as patient self-inflicted lung injury. Okay, so that would worsen the outcome. It will damage the lung. Okay. So this is the modifications you should use. So do not use these are the vents. Don't use this vents. Don't use vented mask when you're using a single limb circuit. Okay. What modification you have to make is non-vented mask, yes. Non-vented connector, yes. The bacterial and viral filter, and below that you have to keep the leak port. So this is how we should connect, so that any gas that is coming out from the patient is filtered by this viral filter and then only exhaled through the leak port. So this modification you should make when you are using the single limb circuit. Or if you have a helmet, you can very well use that. And don't forget about the proning, awake prone positioning. That's called a CARP protocol, COVID awake repositioning proning protocol. Okay, you can self-prone patients, non-intubated patients, any patient who has respiratory embarrassment. So this is 30 to 120 minutes in the lateral position, 30 to 120 minutes in the prone position. And again, the other side you can ask the patient to lie, then supine. You can rotate that. And in this picture, you can see many of the alveoli are compressed. So when the patient lies prone, you can see many are opened up. That is because of a larger lung volume in the dependent position. And that will result in a better matching of your ventilation to perfusion. So the mismatch between ventilation and perfusion from your anterior to the posterior would be minimized or abolished when you make the patient prone. And also the weight of the heart is relieved. There are many mechanisms. The most important is your better matching of your ventilation to perfusion. So this is your awake proning. So we have talked till non-invasive ventilation. So how do you monitor these patients? As I've already told you, work of breathing should be monitored. So what is this? You can ask the patient, how are you? How do you feel? Many of them, most of them will tell you, maybe because maybe they are frightened, they might get intubated, but still they will tell you that, okay, I'm fine. You can ask them to compare with yesterday or before and after your HFNC or NIV. You can see the patient puts in large efforts for each breath. Labored in a sense, yes. You could have paradoxical breathing where you have paradox between your chest and your abdomen. Normally, you need the chest to rise and your abdomen to rise during inspiration. You have swings in CAP, but how much is not mentioned in any of your guidelines. Basically, you have the inspiratory swing of 1 to 2 centimeters. That would be exaggerated. And this is what I told you, more than 9 to 9.5 ml per predicted body weight when the patient is on NIV. And if you use a pleural pressure, monitoring pressure, like esophageal pressure, the pressures would go more than -15. So large efforts are taken by the patient during inspiration. And second thing is you should always look into the level of consciousness. The patient going drowsy, patient not responding to your call, please intubate such patients. So the same patient was put on HFNC, but after some time, patient is still using accessory muscles. She has paradoxical breathing, and at 1 hour of HFNC, the ABG shows mild improvement in oxygenation with a FIT of 0.8. Okay, and the HFNC setting is 40 liters, 37 degrees centigrade, and patient is getting around 80% oxygen. So how do you go from this? The problem here is definitely the work of breathing has not come down. There is increased effort from the patient, and that is making a lot of problem to the patient. and saturation is only 92, and your ROX index is 3.96. So this would tell you that this patient needs to be intubated. Most of the time, you may try NIV, but most of the time they need intubation. Okay. So this is the algorithm or the flow chart we discussed till now. When your saturation is more than 90, you continue supportive measures. And the other options you have when your saturation is less than 90 is a nasal cannula, non-rebreather, HFNC. Look into the ROX index and then see if it's high, you can continue. More than 4.88, you can continue. Intermediate, helmet has good evidence. Low, you intubate. So this is how this thing goes. So coming to invasive mechanical ventilation, that you think when you have the P by F less than 150, maybe you can not the first P by F, but then you can look into the P by F even after keeping HFNC and NIV. And most importantly, you look for this increased work of breathing. That is more of a clinical thing. And you have basically two categories of ventilation. One is the pressure control category, and the second one is the volume control category. So the basic thing in pressure control category is that we set the pressures, or the ventilator has fine control over the pressures in pressure control. So suppose in pressure control, we actually set the pressure, say 20 centimeters of water, that is usually represent a PI, pressure during inspiration. Okay. So if you give this for one patient, he might get 400 ml tidal volume. For another patient, you would get might be only 150 ml. Okay. So that is why it is said that the volume would vary in a pressure control mode of ventilation. Under the pressure control, you have many modes. Whereas in volume control, we say 500 ml tidal volume. Just an example. Okay. To deliver this 500 ml tidal volume, one patient might need only 10 centimeters of water. Another patient might need 45 centimeters of water. The pressure varies in volume control mode of ventilation. Before you go to ventilate the patient, you need to put in an endotracheal tube. Okay. So many methods are there to assess the difficulty in intubation, and many of them cannot be followed because you can't put in your fingers in your mouth of the patient who has COVID. Okay, it's not very fair enough. Okay, but you can identify such patients by looking externally. Okay, evaluate that. There's a 3-3-2 rule. Mallampati score, airway obstruction, ask for snoring, all those things, neck mobility and saturation. So a patient who is having a low saturation, you would find it to keep these patients in apnea for prolonged periods. So this is a typical patient who would have difficult airway, short neck, obese, a large tongue, okay, difficulty opening the mouth, and a stiff cervical spine. Okay, this is again one typical difficult airway. And you should actually see the tube going between your vocal cords. Okay, even if you do with your video laryngoscope. And this is the picture that tells you the grade. There's a Cormack-Lehane classification of your view that you could see during your radio laryngoscopy. That again tells you about the difficulty. You may use a bougie if you are anticipating difficulty, and and you can also use the RAM position if you anticipate difficult obese patients. You can use a RAM position. And during intubation, video laryngoscopy is one that is advised because you can stay a bit far away from the patient, and you go for RSI, which would like giving fentanyl and schooling together. Okay, sedation and schooling together. Pre-oxygenate and give this. You pre-oxygenate with the patient's spontaneous efforts and try to optimize the first attempt success. You can use a ETCO2. This is a portable handheld ETCO2, and this is the typical structure view you should get, and should see the tube passing in between the tubes. You can use a bougie, railroad the bougie, and then introduce the bougie and then railroad the endotracheal tube. Always keep ready a LMA. That is a very good device that you can keep ready, at least 1, 3 or 4 size. Again, any difficult airway, if you can't intubate, you can very well put in a LMA and then ventilate. That can save lives. Okay. So endotracheal tube is the most preferred one, and you may use a endotracheal tube with suction aid. So that is to remove all the secretions that pent up just above the cuff here. So when the patient lies down, all the secretions would come down here and then stay here. To remove those secretions, there's some evidence to prevent VAP incidents in patients who are intubated more than 48 to 72 hours. So after putting a tube with suction aid, you should keep a closed suction. This is the closed suction device where you attach that this end to the endotracheal tube, and the ventilator tubing should come here. So this would remain like that. And whenever you want to give suction, you attach the suction tube here and just press this switch and introduce the tube and then activate the suction by pressing the green switch. Okay. So you don't have to disconnect, because most of these patients would be dependent on high levels of PEEP. Try not to disconnect, because disconnections would increase the aerosol as well as let off all the PEEP that you have developed over time. So patient tube should be suction 8, and you always use the closed suction rather than an open suction. This we have already described regarding the viral filter here, as well as the volume being measured by the ventilator, which is called the axial tidal volume. And ideally use a bacterial viral filter. We come to the settings, okay? Whether you go for pressure control or volume control, it's the tidal volume you should target. Okay, you can either go for pressure control or volume control, but volume control is bit of advantages, because in pressure control your volume would vary. It would vary between patients at different points of time. Today morning you keep a pressure of 20 and see the tidal volume is say 360, which is actually needed, but after some time you see the same 20 would deliver only 300. So because of the varying tidal volume, when very little people to monitor those things, you better go for volume control mode of ventilation. Okay, the mode, so this is the category, and the mode that we use is the assist bar, A bar CM. Okay, that is the mode that gives full support. Okay, you start with 100% oxygen, and then you may decrease as the patient improves on oxygenation. And the tidal volume, if you are going for a volume control or a pressure control, you should have a target tidal volume. So whether it be the pressure control or volume control, you should always keep in mind the target tidal volume. So it varies between 4 to 8. In normal patient, it's only 6 to 8. But because we have a patient who is ARDS, we can go as low as 4 ml per kg. That's predicted body weight. This is the equation to calculate the predicted body weight. So a adult male with 60 inches would weigh 50 kg. That is how I remember. Male patient 60 inches, 50 kg. For every inch above that, you have to add 2.3. Females, it is 45.5. Okay. So, and you should always follow the lung protective ventilation. That is the only thing that has been proved to be decreasing the mortality. ARTSNet trial. Okay. Respirator rate, the answer is towards the patient's baseline. It is as simple as that. Towards the patient's baseline. Okay. So, this is when you start ventilation, not when you wean a patient. Okay. So, when the patient is having 35 breaths, don't go and keep 10. You should keep it at least 28. Okay. So, when you ventilate these patients, you usually have a peak pressure that is shown. This is in a volume control mode of ventilation. Okay, A bar CME. This is a mode, volume category ventilation. And you have something called as the Plateau pressure. We'll describe that in later slides. Okay, Plateau pressure would tell you the alveolar pressure, P plat. That's called a P plat. That will tell you alveolar pressure. Okay, so what are your goals? Whether you be in your volume control mode of ventilation or your pressure control mode of ventilation, your goals are always expressed in terms of Plateau pressure and drying pressure. Okay, whether it is volume control or in pressure control mode of ventilation, these are the two goals you should always stick on to, because anything you break this, you have a high chance that patient can develop ventilation-induced lung injury and barotrauma. Okay, so Plateau pressure you can get from the ventilator. I'll tell you how you can get the Plateau pressure. Okay, Plateau pressure minus PEEP is called the drying pressure. Very simple. Plateau pressure minus the PEEP that you have set is called the drying pressure. So Plateau pressure should be less than 30, drying pressure should be less than 15. These are your goals of ventilation. Okay. Some other ventilators, some of the other settings are, one is the sensitivity of trigger. So when a patient takes a breath, a spontaneous breath, ventilator should come to identify the patient is taking a breath, and in A bar CME mode, ventilator should give the full support. Full tidal volume. 500 ml on set 500 ml thanna kodukkanam. Okay. So how will the ventilator come to know? That is usually by the drop in pressure that is generated because of the patient's spontaneous breathing, inspiration. So any spontaneous inspiration would produce negative pressure in the circuit, and that negativity is sensed by the ventilator. So how much drop should be there from the baseline? And normally we keep 2 centimeters of water drop will trigger the ventilator. That means ventilator will understand patient is taking a breath and it will give full support to that breath in A bar CME mode. It could be also flow. Again, the value is 2 liters per minute. Okay, just remember the value 2. When you also set the trigger, you can set it as 2. Then IU ratio. IU ratio for normal patient is 1:2. Okay. You may, ARDS old guidelines will tell you to go for 2:1. That's called the inverse ratio ventilation, but it had little evidence. So we don't use inverse ratio ventilation now. Maybe maximum 1:1 you can go. Flow pattern. Very few ventilators will ask you the flow pattern. So just remember, there is some evidence, maybe again very controversial, in ARDS, a decelerating flow pattern would help the recruitment of your lungs. So this is the picture showing the decelerating flow pattern. Okay, if a ventilator allows you to select a decelerating flow pattern in a volume control mode of ventilation, you can select that. Otherwise, it's okay. It does not make much of a difference, but still. Then they will ask you to set the PEEP. We'll see how PEEP is set. There are many methods to set the PEEP, but the most easiest, what they describe in COVID, is to gradually increase the PEEP by 2. Start with 5. 5 will not adversely affect a patient's hemodynamics, provided the intravascular volume is adequate. Okay, so you increase the PEEP in increments of 2 and see the hemodynamic, the effect it has on oxygenation as well as hemodynamics. And usually, you may, in severe cases, you may have to go up to 15. But in moderate cases, 8 to 10 would be, that is a general recommendation, not to be, basically it should be individualized. We'll discuss that. And then you have to switch on all the alarms that will tell you problems when you ventilate such patients. So one such alarm, the most important I think, is the exhale tidal volume. So if you ask the ventilator to give 400 ml to the patient at the inspirator limb, 100 ml leaks out, patient gets only 300 ml. Nobody will know the patient got only 300 ml. So you have to measure what is coming out of the lung by keeping a sensor in the ventilator and measuring what is coming out. Okay, that's called the exhale tidal volume. And the difference between the inspire and the exhale should be less than 50 ml. So when the exhale tidal volume is less than 350 ml, alarm should sound, telling you that there is some kind of problem. Because patient, we have asked the ventilator to give 400 ml, patient ventilator is not able to get back for more than 350 ml. So there is leak somewhere. Okay, you have to troubleshoot. The pressures are usually kept 10 centimeters above and below the baseline. High inspiratory pressures, troubleshooting would be blocks in the tube, or it could be again a very stiff lung. I hope you remember the first picture we saw, either stiff lung or a block in the tube. Okay. Low pressures signify leaks, again, leaks, cuff leak or some kind of leak. Apnea alarm, especially in a patient who is spontaneously breathing in a weaning mode, the typical default is 15 to 20 seconds. And if patient is not breathing, it would go into a backup mode also. Higher rate is 10. And FiO2 is again 10% above and below what we have set. So this is how you set the alarms, and all the alarms should be switched on. That is how the ventilator will try to tell you that there are problems. And please go and troubleshoot any kind of alarm that sounds. So we talked about volume control mode of ventilation category. Basically, it is said to have a limited flows because the flows are fixed in volume control. As I've already said, the pressures vary, but they have a fixed tidal volume. It is safe, okay? Especially when you're thinking of muscle relaxants, giving muscle relaxants or giving a lot of sedation, okay? Tidal volume, you should change the mode to volume control mode of ventilation. That is better. But another question that come to your mind is, say 500 ml is the tidal volume that is set. Would you allow the ventilator to go on giving 500 ml irrespective of the pressure? Irrespective, say 100 centimeters of water? No, it cannot happen again. So what we do here in a volume control mode of ventilation, we set what's a pressure that's called the pressure limit. So ventilator, when it reaches that pressure in volume control mode of ventilation, ventilator will know that it should not exceed that pressure. And normal default setting for pressure limit is 40 centimeters of water. So when you connect this patient to the ventilator, maybe if your target tidal volume is 500 ml, if the pressures that are needed to deliver 500 ml is less than 40, ventilator will deliver 500 ml. Imagine a scenario, the patient's lungs are very stiff and ventilator needs more than 40 to deliver this 500 ml. It will not deliver. So what alarm will come up? Low tidal volume. If it is 50 ml less than what you have set, high pressure alarm will also come on. Okay. Just keep this in mind. We'll discuss this later. And remember, you have to measure the alveolar pressure by measuring the P plate. We'll discuss that later. Okay. You have to do a procedure that's called the inspiratory hold for you to get the P plate. We'll discuss that later. Whereas in pressure control mode of ventilation, the flows are usually described to be unlimited. and it has a decelerating flow pattern. So it is quite good in ARDS. But if you don't have a lot of people to monitor such patients, especially tidal volume, you better go for a volume control mode of ventilation because volume would vary. It's not very safe when you're going to give muscle relaxants. It protects against. So if you have set a pressure of 20 centimeters of water and PEEP of 10, the peak pressure will not be more than 30. Peak pressure, peak will not be more than 30. That is 20 plus 10 centimeters of water. Alveolar pressure also should measure when the patient is on pressure control mode of ventilation. So what all things should you measure in volume control A bar CME? You should measure the P peak. You should measure the P plat. I will tell you how. You have to give the inspiratory hold and measure. And this would reflect the alveolar pressure. We talked about the ventilator, narrow tube, and the alveolus. So the pressure that we all should be very cautious about is the pressure in the alveoli, and that is usually reflected by your Plato pressure. Okay, drying pressure should be less than 15, which is nothing but P plat minus P. So if you get the Plato pressure, it is very easy to calculate the drying pressure. And some ventilators you can get the compliance also. So case number 2, the height is given as 62 inches. So this would be, I think she is a female. She was a female, so it would be 45.5. That is for female 60 inches plus 2.3 plus 2.3. That is come to around say 50 kg. Okay. So we start with 8 ml per kg, and after some time we come down. Usually by 1 hour we come down to 6 ml per kg. So we are ventilating patients with 6 ml per kg. Why tidal volume 300 is being selected? Because it is 6 ml per kg of predicted body weight. Predicted is from the height. So 50 into 6 is 300 ml. We have kept a rate of 28 because it's towards the patient's baseline. On to the P peak. Okay. Can you see? Hello. So I think you have missed some of the points. So we have gone with 300 ml tidal volume because it is 6 ml per kg of 50 kg. So 50 kg is the predictable body weight. Okay. So how do you monitor this patient? You have to keep an idea of. You have to have an idea of what regarding the peak pressure, which is not very significant. We said the Plato pressure, which is the alveolar pressure, is more significant than the peak pressure. Okay. But see the problem. There is a problem here. You have set 300 ml, but what is coming out is only 220 ml. The respiratory rate is 28. We have set 28. A patient can breathe in A bar CME mode. Yes. There is a lot of dyssynchrony. We have charted muscle relaxants. FiO2 is 1, PEEP is 5, and SpO2 is 93%. So what is this problem? And there are 2 alarms that have come up. High pressure alarm and a low tidal volume. That we understand because it is less than 250 ml, the alarm has come up. And high pressure because the peak pressure is already reached 40. So what are the differentials of low exhale tidal volume? Whenever I talk about tidal volume, that is the exhale tidal volume. As I've already said, it is a leak in the circuit. Anywhere in the cuff, anywhere, some of your connectors might be open, might be loose. Or it could be a faulty sensor. That is the expiratory sensor. That is what measures the gas that's coming out of the lung. That could be faulty. Very easy to understand both the differentials. There is another problem. Here the ventilator, second problem is ventilator is not able to give that 300 ml because high pressures are needed. How do you know that? Here, see the peak pressure. Peak pressure is 40. You can look into the P limit. What is the P limit that we have kept? I told you by default, most of the ventilators will have a P limit of 40. That means in this scenario, what is happening is that the ventilator is not able to deliver 300 ml because we have asked the ventilator not to increase the pressure more than 40. And this scenario is typically said to be a pressure limited breath. And this commonly happens in ARDS patients because their lungs are very stiff. So what you can do is that you can troubleshoot. You can see what is happening. And if you think that it is the high pressures in the because of very stiff lung that is causing the problem, you may increase the pressure limit to 50 and see if the tidal volume is delivered. But increasing the pressure to 50 may cause barotrauma. Okay, gradually increase to 45 and gradually increase to say this 50 and see if it is able to deliver. And also monitor the plateau pressure. In a pressure limited breath, your plateau pressure will not be measured. That is the thing. Your plateau pressure cannot be measured because it is a pressure limited breath. Okay. So what are the differential diagnosis of high pressure alarm? See, second alarm is high pressure alarm. Okay. High pressure alarm is sounding because of a high resistance. That is because of a narrow tube, block in the tube, bronchial asthma, COPD, high resistance, tube biting, tube kinking, secretions in the tube. This you can see clinically after examine the patient, see if the patient is biting the tube. Or it could be a problem of low compliance, which is very typical of ARDS. Very typical of ARDS. Okay. So what you do here is if you can differentiate between these two, we'll see how we will differentiate between high resistance and low compliance. So we talked about the pressure limit. I think you have understood that. That is the limit that we keep in a volume control mode of ventilation. That is to avoid any kind of barotrauma. But most of the ARDS patients would need higher pressures. So when you have a pressure limited breath, as we had in the earlier scenario, we just see the peak pressure and the P limit. Both would be the same. So how to set the P limit? Next question. So in Maca ventilator, you take the alarm profile, alarm setting screen. Okay. When you take the alarm setting screen, you can see we have asked the ventilator to sound an alarm when the pressure increases to 40 centimeters of water. Whatever pressure you have kept for the high pressure alarm to sound will act as the P limit. Okay, so go to the alarm setting and see what is the pressure that you have kept for the high pressure alarm to sound. Okay, we have asked the ventilator to sound an alarm when the pressure reaches 40. That will act as a P limit. So what is the P limit here? It is 40. In other ventilators such as Air Liquide, look in the box that tells you P about the P peak. Okay, in that you can have another box, small box. Okay, so that is again the high pressure alarm. That will again act as the pressure limit. So you can touch this is a touch screen. You can touch this small box. You can turn the knob to increase the P limit. But when you increase the P limit, remember you might damage the lung. Lung that is innocent would be damaged, not the diseased lung. Okay. So that would act as a pre-limit. So second the issue that we had to discuss is to differentiate between a high resistance and a low compliance. We told that high pressure can occur because of a tube problem or a lung problem. So how do you differentiate? Measure the P plat. So how to measure the P plat? I told you inspiratory hold. Yes. You can press. There's a button for it written as inspiratory hold. You can press that. Or second option to get the P plat is to set a T pause. On the ventilator setting, you have an option for T pause. You can set it as 10 to 15%. So every breath, 10 to 15% of the inspirated time would be spent as a pause, and the P plat would be shown on the ventilator screen. You don't have to go there and press the inspiratory hold button every time. Okay. If you want to measure the P plat with the inspiratory hold, there are certain prerequisites for inspiratory hold. Patient should not breathe during that hold. That means patient should be adequately sedated or given muscle relaxants. There should not be any leaks in the circuit. For the pressure to plateau, there should be no leaks in the circuit. Usual time that you give the hold is 0.5 seconds, very small. Okay, 0.5 seconds. And how do you differentiate? When your P peak is very near to the P plate, okay, both are high. Both are high. P peak and P plate is high. It is an alveolar problem or a lung problem like ARDS. If there is again not a well marked cutoff, usually we say that more than 7 to 10 difference between a P peak and the P flat, we will think of a resistance problem. And in ARDS patient, you would have a P flat very near the P peak. Okay. In only obstruction, you have this problem. Okay. You have a gap between the delta P peak minus P flat would be higher when you have a resistance problem. Okay. This is so you have troubleshooted your high pressure alarm. You know exactly what is the problem. Okay. So this is your graph that you would get when you look into the plateau pressure. This is the plateau part that would give your alveolar pressure. This is your peak pressure. You give the hold during inspiration. At the end of inspiration, both the valves would be closed. Inspiratory and expiratory valve would be closed. And then this drops down a bit. The difference between this and this is called the it will tell you and give you an idea about the your airway resistance that is offered, and that is called as a trans airway pressure. Okay, so if it is trans airway pressure is very high, say more than 10 centimeters of problem, most probably it's a problem of your resistance to block ആയിരിക്കും. അതേസമയം രണ്ടും almost equal, 2 centimeter same ആണ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ 2 centimeter difference ഉള്ളെങ്കിൽ it is ARDS. So when you are ventilating these patients with lung protective ventilation, what are your goals? There are 3 main goals. Okay, one, it is your P flat. I already told you it's P flat and drying pressure. P flat less than 30 is your goal. So what happens if your P flat is more than 30? What is the only option you have? You decrease the tidal volume by 1 till you reach a minimum of 4. So our patient would be ventilating with 200 ml tidal volume. Okay, drying pressure less than 15. Again, that is one of your goals, and that is also not met. You can try recruitment by increasing PEEP. PEEP could on the drying pressure shaking correct because it's the difference between P flat and your PEEP. If P flat is less than 25, it is acceptable. But in that scenario, if a tidal volume is less than 6, namakku oru 6 engilum venam. Less than 6 anengil increase your tidal volume by 1 ml per kg till you reach P flat more than 25 or your tidal volume is 6 ml per kg. So നമ്മൾ 4 വരെ പോയാലും നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിൽ 6 വരെ കൊണ്ടെത്തിക്കാൻ ശ്രമിക്കണം. Looking at the P flat. P flat more than 30, definitely it is 4 ml per kg. Okay. Second goal is your ABG. ABG is respiratory acidosis because we are hypoventilating these patients. 200 ml is very little. Okay. Even though increase the rate to 35, your minute ventilation should be very less. Okay. So your pH is what you should look for, not the carbon dioxide. Not the carbon dioxide, it is your pH you should look for. pH is between 7.15 to 7.3. You can increase the rate till 35, maximize 35 till it is more than 7.3. pH is more than 7.3. If it is less than 7.15, it is very dangerous. Okay, anything less than 7.15 is not acceptable. So in spite of increasing the rate to more than 35, you have pH of less than 7.15. Your ARTSNet guideline ask you to give soda bicarb. It is a bit paradoxical because when you give bicarb, you may correct the pH for some time. But remember, bicarb would be converted to carbon dioxide and then ultimately increase the PaCO2. And if it is more than 7.45, definitely decrease the respiratory. So the maximum, the goal is 7.3 to 7.45. Less than 7.3, increase the respiratory rate. Less than 7.15, you may give increase the respiratory to 35, but still it is less than 7.15. You may give bicarb. That's just to buy time. Okay, you should think of other things when this scenario happens. Okay, 7.45 more than you can decrease the respiratory. Third goal is your oxygenation goal. Here I have not quoted the ARTSNet recommendation because there is another study that has come up saying that your saturation in ARDS patients should be 94 to 96%. Because many patients who were ARTSNet in 55 to 80, either 88 to 94 പറയുന്നുള്ളൂ ARTSNet study. But there is one study that have come up after that. which said that patients who had low oxygenation had more adverse effects. Okay, so maybe you can have a intermediate value, say around 92% would be okay. Okay, and the PaO2 in the range of say 85 would be acceptable. Let me tell you once again that even this goal of 88 to 94 would be very difficult to achieve in a patient who has true ARDS, severe ARDS. So what are the oxygenation manipulations you can do to increase your oxygenation? One is increase the FiO2. Definitely already the FiO2 would be 100% IRQ. And PEEP is another one that would increase the mean airway pressure and improve the oxygenation. Okay, so again I told you how do you adjust the PEEP? You can gradually increase the PEEP by 2. That's the most simplest method. Second method is you can look into you have a table that this is the table. So this is a combination of FiO2 and PEEP. So suppose our patient is in a 50% oxygen with a PEEP of 10 and he's not meeting your oxygenation, go rightward. Go rightward. Okay. Go rightward. So that is how you can adjust the FiO2 and PEEP. This is just a combination of the things that the ARTSNet guideline will give you. So coming back to the case number 2, after 4 hours invasive ventilation with sedation and muscle relaxants, your ventilator settings are this. These are the monitored values. Again, the P peak is 30 and your 40. P plat is 30. Drying pressure is only 14. This is acceptable. Tidal volume is 300. Yes. Okay. So alarms are nil. And you did to do the ABG. What is the problem with the ABG? FiO2 is 0.8. See, PaO2 is not accepted. It's even with the ARTSNet recommendation is 55. So PaO2 is not acceptable. So we have to troubleshoot. Okay, hypoxemia is there. So PaO2 depends on 2 things. PaO2 depends on only 2 things: FiO2 and mean airway pressure. Mean airway pressure, average pressure. Okay, average pressures. FiO2. FiO2 is already 1. So how do you adjust this thing? You increase the mean airway pressure. So how do you increase the mean airway pressure? You can either increase the tidal volume, which again is not recommended. You can increase the PI in a pressure control mode of ventilation, which again would increase the tidal volume, which is again not recommended. So next option is to increase the PEEP, baseline pressure. So you can increase the peak, okay? Or you can manipulate the IE ratio so that you have more time that is spent on inspiration. Again, that is not recommended. Inverse ratio ventilation is not recommended. So only thing you can manipulate here is the PEEP. So you can go for a bit higher PEEP, but remember the more high you keep, there would be hemodynamic consequences. Okay. So you can gradually increase to 10. We have a patient is having a PEEP of only 5. So there is definitely luxury to increase a PEEP of 10 to the PEEP of 10. And that is always done in a stepwise manner. So we can label this patient to have refractory hypoxemia. So basically refractory hypoxemia, there are different definitions of refractory hypoxemia. So you basically have a hypoxemia with high FiO2, okay? High FiO2 more than 0.5 and PEEP of at least 10, okay? P/F is less than 100. Saturation is less than 80. This is one definition of refractory hypoxemia. So this is expected in most of the patients with ARDS. So how do you troubleshoot? How do you go by? How can you increase your oxygenation? So can we allow the patient to remain hypoxemic? Do you have certain cutoffs? How much is okay? PaO2 50 ana okay, 40 ana okay. So there are very little studies regarding the how much low you can allow permissive hypoxemia. Second is definitely increase the PEEP. Okay, that is one option. But do we have guidelines? Do we have recommendations? We'll see. Is there any special mode? One mode that would be of advantage in ARDS? Okay. Can you use muscle relaxants like atracurium or cisatracurium, preferably over becronium? Can we prone the patient, intubated and prone? Can we recruit the lung? We have something that is called open lung concept, that is open up the lung and keep them open. Okay. Can you give lung rest by going to ECMO? So these are the options that we have. And remember, any of the options that you select should not produce any kind of ventilation-induced lung injury. Ventilation-induced lung injury, or it should not have any hemodynamic consequences. When you increase the PEEP, your mean airway pressure would be high, and it might affect your hemodynamics. So what they say is that all the things that we look to say that our oxygenation is are adequate are very imprecise Basically, you have to go into each cell or at least each organ and look into the oxygen and say it is okay. Okay. So there are imprecise surrogates. And as I've told you, the ARTSNet guideline would ask you to target a PO2 55 to 80 only. Then another study came in that's called the ICU ROCKS, which included patients who were having ARDS and also patients who were on oxygen therapy, and said that low oxygen targets are okay. Low oxygen for even normal patients, sorry, for all ICU patients, not even ARDS, a saturation of 100 is not needed. But then later, another study, this is the latest study that came in March 12, 2020, that is liberal or conservative oxygen therapy for acute respiratory distress syndrome only. So they studied ARDS patients only and found out that patients who had less than 94% saturation had higher mortality. And study was actually stopped because of this high mortality in such patients. So I again tell you that this goal is again very difficult to achieve in ARDS patients. So coming to any one mode, no. So whether we want category is better, whether pressure control is better, no. Any mode is better. One mode that has bit edge is your airway pressure release ventilation. And the final wording is, it's a good idea. It's a bit complicated also and little hard evidence. So one study was positive study, one study was negative. We need more studies to say that APRV is good for patients. Coming to the option we have with respect to increasing the mean airway pressure by increasing the PEEP. Yes, PEEP, there are many methods to find the optimal PEEP or the best PEEP, but the easiest I would tell is to gradually increase. That is being the recommendation for COVID patients. Gradually increase the PEEP by 2, okay, and see what effects it has on oxygenation as well as on your hemodynamics. Or another simple method is your PEEP FiO2 table that I've already described. So these are two other simplest method by which you can improve the oxygenation by increasing PEEP. And how about evidence for high PEEP? There was a trial in 2016 which found that there was improvement in oxygenation, no effect on mortality when you increase the PEEP. And there's another trial that was alveolar recruitment trial in 2017, which had some kind of recruitment manuals and higher PEEP. And they found that higher mortality was in patients who had higher PEEP. So it's a bit very controversial, and the best answer would be to individualize. So if the PEEP is causing hemodynamic disturbance, don't go for very high PEEP. Okay, come down on the PEEP. Regarding neuromuscular blockers, regarding atracurium and cisatracurium, there was one previous study which said that you should be using atracurium and cisatracurium for 48 hours. But that another latest study has come out. That's a ROST trial, which said that regular use is not recommended. But again, if you have a lot of dyssynchrony, the oxygenation is not met, you have the room for giving atracurium or cisatracurium. So when you use vecronium, critical illness, neuropathy, myopathy incidence is very high. Vecronium plus steroids. So what the recommend is atracurium or cisatracurium. I know they are all short acting. You might see patients breathing with atracurium. Yes, that is there, but still, that is a recommendation. So which all patients would you use atracurium? It's P/F less than 150 with retaining carbon dioxide or ventilator dyssynchrony, and there is lung de-recruitment. You want to give get more tidal volume with the same pressure. You might try to override the resistance that is offered or the stiffness that is offered by the chest wall. You can use atracurium or cisatracurium. Okay, but remember, routine use is not recommended. Most of our patients are on atracurium because of the severe hypoxemia. So we'll see this patient after 8 hours of lung protective ventilation. There is no dyssynchrony, there is no alarm. We'll see the oxygenation is just 64. So we think of increasing the PEEP and we think of recruitment manuals also. Again, there is little evidence for lung recruitment manuals. Recruitment is, see, basically you have 1/3 of the lung is normal in ARDS. 1/3 is recruitable. Last 1/3 is non-recruitable. That is the concept that you should have in ARDS. So when you give high pressures, what would happen here is that the normal lung would get damaged because all the pressure would go into those alveoli which get opened up. So normal lung would get damaged, and that normal 1/3 is the baby lung concept. That is why we are using the low tidal volume ventilation, lung protective ventilation. We are trying to protect whatever is normal. rather than give high pressures and open up those recruitable and non-recruitable lung. That is not the standard. Okay. So lung recruitment method is to open up those alveoli, and there are different methods. And again, there is no evidence for one particular to be effective, or lung recruitment to be effective for all ARDS patients. So potential for recruitment varied widely. So if you want to use, you might use a stepwise recruitment manual. Again, it has not good evidence to be used in all ARDS patients. Go for a pressure control mode of ventilation. Okay. PI is 25 PEEP of 10. Increase by 15. Both are increased by 15 till you reach 55 and 40. And monitor SpO2. Okay. So patient is ventilated every 2 minutes. You have to increase the pressures. Monitor SpO2. Fine. So here it was 88 and it has improved to 96. That is because more alveoli have opened up. Second step you have to do here is to maintain that PI at 55. Okay, and come down on the PEEP. First step is draw directly to 25, and then from there 2.5 decrements every 3 minutes and monitor the saturation. What would happen when you decrease the PEEP? There would be a point in time when many of the alveoli would get collapsed, okay, because of the low PEEP. They don't remain open. PEEP keeps them open. It recruits alveoli. So you can see the drop in saturation. This is the de-recruitment point. This is the de-recruitment point. Okay. So what do you do then? The third step, go back, increase the PEEP to 40. Again, from 12.5 gradually increase to 40. Keep it there for 1 minute. So you have again opened up all those alveoli. Come down. Then gradually come down. And sorry, it is decrease here. From 40, decrease the PEEP to a value 2.5 centimeters above the de-recruitment point. So what is the de-recruitment point? Is around 12.5. So what is the value you keep? You don't go to 12.5, you keep it at 15. Okay. Once the PEEP is set, at 15, then decrease the PI to match the tidal volume of 4 to 6 ml per kg and PEEP at less than 30. This is how you should be doing a stepwise recruitment manner. Remember, it is not advised for all patients. Okay. And this can produce barotrauma by itself. See the pressure? It's very high. The pressures developed are very high. You may have to even overcome the P limit that you have kept. So we'll see what is the effect of PEEP as well as recruitment maneuvers on the lung. So this is without PEEP, no recruitment. Okay, here the lung is not allowed to completely collapse because of PEEP. So all these breaths, last breaths have high PEEP. So lung is not allowed to collapse. So you can see the alveoli have opened up, but this is just the outside picture. Don't try to open up this alveoli like this in our patient because that can produce barotrauma, rupture of the normal alveoli. So basically, we said that lung recruitment maneuvers are not to be used for all patients, and we had a systemic review that was done in 2010. No improvement in mortality, though they improved in oxygenation. So basically, we have to have some improvement in oxygenation, okay, in our patients, because I told you it is refractory hypoxemia. You may be forced to use some of our lung recruitment maneuvers, but then do them very, take all the precautions, do a monitoring of the BP quite frequently, and then do it in very slow manner. Okay, we talked about prone position ventilation. Yes, it has evidence. Yes. When to start prone, that is again the P/F less than 150 in spite of invasive ventilation, high PEEP, okay, with high FiO2 and PEEP more than 5 centimeters of water. So the thing that had evidence was early prone ventilation. You have to prone the patient early in the course of the disease, not after 1 month. Okay, so you should prone early, and duration of prone is 16 hours day 1 and 16 to 18 hours on day subsequent days. Okay, when to stop is you have better oxygenation. Contraindication is a bit of hemodynamic, maybe one support we would still prone. I told you how this would be useful. Okay, after proning the patient, so suppose if you prone by afternoon, you may make the patient supine in the next day morning and take an ABG, frequent ABGs, and see that oxygenation is improved more than 4 hours after making patient supine. the improvement is oxygenation is lasting more than 4 hours. Okay, if that is there, that tells you that your prone sessions were effective and you can continue prone position, prone sessions. Okay, suppose when you take the ABG after making the supine, patient supine, there is retention of carbon dioxide, pH is less than 7.25, your prone sessions are not good, you go for ECMO. Okay. And during prone, patient കമന്ന് കിടക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് ഒരു ABG ചെയ്യാൻ നേരത്ത്, if it is more than worsening more than 20%, തന്നെ നേരെ കിടത്തുക. Okay. So this has evidence, Prosiva trial. We'll see if we can just see how to prone patients. So when you place the patient without any pillows, you have to rotate the head every 2 hours. So when you're using pillows, you can tie you can inflate your gloves മൂന്നെണ്ണം എടുത്ത് ടൈ ചെയ്തിട്ട് അതിന്റെ ഇടയ്ക്കോട്ട് ഹെഡ് ഇറക്കി വെക്കുക, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഹെഡ് സപ്പോർട്ട് കൊടുക്കാനുള്ള സാധനങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത് ചെയ്യാം. So you have to, if you are not using pillows, you have to rotate the head every 2 hours. So you should be careful that tube does not get dislodged during the rotation of the head. So last thing that we can help the patient out with is the ECMO. Okay. So indication is, again, you have already proned the patient, you have intubated the patient, patient is on high PEEP and high FiO2, but still oxygen is not met. Oxygenation criteria, P/F is less than 50 for more than 3 hours, less than 100 with FiO2 of 100% or FiO2 of 1, carbon dioxide retention, and even cardiac arrest, cardiac shock or cardiac arrest. These are the usual indications for going for ECMO. There is some studies that have shown ECMO is good for ARDS patient, and hopefully usually give lung rest, or you can bridge to or liver lung transplant. Okay, so these are the uses of ECMO. So suppose our patient has improved. So how do you know? It is the oxygenation status has improved. It's more than 200. That is the time when you think of weaning. PO2 is more than 60 with FiO2 has come down. Minimal PEEP is almost 5. And maybe up to 8 also can be acceptable. SaO2 is more than 90, and when you want to extubate, the protect airway reflexes are there. And that is called rapid shallow breathing index. Not again, it was there. That's called the Tobin's index, but then again not well validated for ARDS patients, ARDS patients. Less than 105. That is the respiratory rate divided by tidal volume in liters. So you can calculate. So tidal volume is 500 ml, and it's and your respiratory rate is 30. So 30 by 0.5 is around 60. So you can. This tells you it predicts the success of extubation and weaning. And which mode would you use? So we have put the patient on volume control A-bar CME, and the mode that we would use for weaning would be pressure support ventilation, and the patient is negative by the time you have started weaning, you can go for TPs and you can even extubate to NIV. But if the patient is not negative, you might put him on pressure support ventilation rather than TPs and extubate to NIV. And this is the usual settings that is almost equivalent to a TPs weaning, pressure support of 6 to 8 and PEEP of 5 to 8 centimeters of water. So when you extubate, during intubation also you can use a aerosol box, but one study said that when you use the aerosol box, the number of virus particles that come to you is more. So that is why I didn't talk about aerosol box during intubation. But I think it can be used for extubation. You can use that and ഒരു plastic sheet in the പുറത്തിട്ട് extubate ചെയ്താൽ മതി. Anticipate another problem is that these viruses can produce vocal cord edema. So even after extubation, there might be problems with your airway, and you can cover it up with HFNC also or in NIV. Regarding tracheostomy, usually by the 10th day, we told about the wire infectivity becoming less by the 10th day. So why do you want to do a tracheostomy? The answer is very simple. It would help you better give better pulmonary toileting. And you can have minimal sedation. Once the patient is on tracheostomy, most of them would be happy without any kind of sedation. It has little evidence for like incidence of VAP is less and duration of mechanical ventilation is less. No evidence will that illa. Disadvantage is aerosol generating procedure on tracheostomy. Complications, you could have coagulopathy, and surgical tracheostomy is found to be equally good compared to your percutaneous dilatation tracheostomy in COVID patients, and ideally they should be done in negative pressure rooms. To sum up our ventilation protocols we did was we had PBF more than 150. We went to started from with your oxygen cannula or a simple face mask, then to HFNC, then to NIV. We looked into the ROX index. More severe, we planned to intubate the patient. Work of breathing was high. We gave lung protective ventilation. We tried recruitability and PEEP titration. We prone the patient, and finally we plan for ECMO. So this is the algorithm that tells you about how to manage the respiratory problems. Then there are other problems like coagulopathy. So basically this coagulopathy is due to lot of inflammation, endotheliitis. Okay, endothelium is inflamed. You have ACE receptors, ACE2 receptors in the endothelium also. So there is platelet activation, but thrombocytopenia is rare initially. Predisposed to both venous and arterial thrombosis. And what are the high risk for coagulopathy is the respiratory status itself. A hypoxemia, severely hypoxemic patient can have coagulopathy, and sepsis induced coagulopathy score more than 4, high C-reactive protein, high D-dimer, high fibrinogen. So what they found was that the D-dimer is very high. In sepsis, what will happen is that there is fibrinolytic failure. But here there is a lot of fibrinolysis that occurs that would increase the D-dimer. Okay, fibrinogen levels are increased. But in COVID coagulopathy, there is minimal alteration of your PT-INR and platelet count, at least initially. And there is venous thromboembolism, arterial thrombosis are more frequent compared to sepsis-induced coagulopathy or DIC. Okay, so this is the sepsis-induced coagulopathy score. There you have the PT-INR, coagulation, and the SOFA that will tell you about this SIC score. If it's more than 4, it is high risk for coagulation. So you might have to increase the anticoagulant. So if the patient is high risk for coagulation, you have option of heparin infusion. But remember to do a point of care ultrasound to see if there is any DVT in your femoral veins. And you have to have high dose. Continue your infusion. If you rule out this, you can give BD doses, high doses of Clexane, and look in the D-dimer. If your risk is low, D-dimer more than 3, it is again as above as this one. If it is 0.5 to 3, Clexane 40 BD, less than 0.5 D-dimer, Clexane 40 OD. So this will help you to decide how much anticoagulants you should keep. This is a chart showing a patient already on VAR for dabigatran coming with COVID, and how do you adjust the coagulation. The simple thing is you have to convert to heparin, either low molecular weight or standard heparin, unfractionated heparin, and then switch back to your warfarin or dabigatran at the time of discharge. That is how it should be done. This is one of the deadliest complications we might have, but then definition wise we can't diagnose cytokine release syndrome very well, but still it's more of a clinical. So we don't measure IL-6, but if you can have rise in IL-6. The treatment is tocilizumab, which is a monoclonal antibody against the IL-6 receptor. Okay, and the dose is 8 milligram per kg, but decrease the dose when the patient is having a abnormal LFT or abnormal neutrophil platelet counts. This is the Kerala guideline for the use of criteria for using tocilizumab, and it is well written. So rapidly worsening respiratory status, sudden deterioration, fever, usually fever, but then patients on CRRT and ICU might be having hypothermia also, and ALC less than 1000, elevated markers. So there's and they don't have a poor prognosis due to other causes. Okay, a healthy patient other comorbidities absence of systemic infection. So tocilizumab would is a good, very high immunosuppression action is there, so it can produce a lot of secondary infections. Another problem that we commonly face, almost around 40 to 50% of our patients have AK. So there are different causes for that. So one is your prerenal, tubular, ATN. It could be rhabdomyolysis. It could be cytokine release syndrome. Some patients would undergo contrast to rule out the pulmonary embolism, endotheliitis, thrombotic events, angiotensin 2 pathway, which is again very common in your kidneys also. Organ crosstalk. So one organ fails, the other organ also fails, and also by complex process. So basically, it can be divided into those with proteinuria. It's very difficult to collect this urine for day and things, but then that is how they differentiate between problem with the kidney and then other kinds of problems. And remember, one study showed a high incidence of AK in COVID patients compared to non-COVID patients, and many of them needed renal replacement therapy, and renal mortality is very high in patients who develop AK. So remember, AK is not a good sign of recovery. So, and the incidence is more in diabetic patients with a high respiratory rate, neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, and high LDH. So LDH might tell you about your patient going into AK in high mortality. So this is the drug. I don't think I will discuss this in later. I think you'll have another class on the drug therapy. Basically, you should start drugs as per the timeline I've shown the first time. And fluid therapy, again, this is a bit controversial because you would try to have a conservative fluid therapy in patients with ARDS. And remember, these patients would have AK. One of the reasons for AK is prerenal. So keeping them dry is also a problem. So the best option would be euvolemia. And the best indication for your volume status is your urine output. So basically, if we can monitor the critically ill patients' hourly urine output, that would be the best thing. And most of the patients don't have a Foley's catheter, but you can ask them to measure at least 4th hourly when they pass the urine. Ask them to measure before they throw it. And clinically assess the patient. It's a bit difficult to assess. You can't say edematous patient would have an adequate intravascular status. Though sepsis guidelines, all those things would tell you to go for dynamic variables. You use crystalloids like renal lactate or plasmalite for restation. So how do you manage is that one thing is the patient is shocked, you can give increments of 250 to 500 ml boluses in 50 to 30 minutes and see if the patient is improving or the patient is going bad. The patient is going bad, you feel that more of a cardiogenic shock, or you might think the patient is fluid overloaded. You stop your further administration. And one thing that you can use in spontaneously breathing patient is something called the passive leg raising test. It is actually said to do the cardiac output monitoring when you do the passive leg raising test, but some people would stick on to your BP also, and it is validated for your cardiac output monitoring. So you have dynamic variables. These are the things that would vary with your respiratory cycle, including a stroke volume variation, pulse pressure variation, IVC size variation. All these things are a bit difficult without an ultrasound and training. But still, you can give, remember, you give small increments. That would be the best thing we can do without such advanced monitoring. And sedation, yes, any patient who's intubated would need sedation because of the distress he is having, because of the first time he's getting intubated, he would not tolerate the tube. He would actually spit it out. And deep sedation would decrease spontaneous breathing. And the drugs, benzodiazepines, has little evidence, but still we use that because of lack of availability of fentanyl. Dexmed again can produce hypotension. Propofol is again one agent that can produce hypotension. But these are the things that I usually describe. Benzodiazepines would have high incidence of delirium in ICU. Regarding dexamethasone, I think you know the recovery trial which said that dexamethasone can be used. Nutritional therapy, again, very important point here is your nutrition. Very rarely addressed to properly, especially after the first week. So you try to give him oral nutrition, if not possible, put in an riles tube and we don't get those formula feeds. We are still on to that kanni and milk things that we give through the Ryle's tube. It would be very difficult to meet calorie of at least 25 to 30 kilocalorie per kg per day, and a protein of at least 1.2 to 1.5 gram per day. That is your calorie and protein requirement. You might need, many patients in our ICU need renal replacement therapy. They have oliguric renal failure. 40 to 50% have AK. They have severe acidosis also, and this acidosis will worsen the potassium level also. So antibiotics usually start with azithromycin or ceftriaxone, and then if you think of bacterial infection, definitely step up. And BAP prevention, DVT head up position, suction tube, all those things should be there. DVT prophylaxis should be, most of them have treatment heparin dose rather than this thing. And stress-related mucosal disease, pantoprazole, especially for patients who have bleeding. So we are not supposed to use nebulizers. So you have to use MDI. In case you want to use, you can have a MDI adapter that usually comes with some of our closed suction devices. This is something like this, you can see, but don't throw it off because it is very difficult to get. And you remember that that your HME should be somewhere here. That should be, this is your endotracheal tube, and your HME should be here. So if you keep your HME on this side, your drug will not go to the patient. So this is coming to the end. So this is the screening for all patients who are critically ill. It is very simple. Infection, I-HUG fast SBID, infection control, whether it be antibiotics or antiviral. When it is time for you to stop, you should stop. At of bed elevation 30 to 45 degrees. Ulcer prophylaxis, again, any intubated usually get ulcer prophylaxis, pantoprazole. More than 48 hours intubation, you get pantoprazole, and most of the drugs that we give have ulcerogenic property also. Glycemic control is usually 140 to 180. Feeding, I had already told you to achieve what 25 to 30 kilocalorie, at least by the end of a week. Start small doses if the patient is not tolerating of feeds, and then increase to 25 to 30 kilocalorie and protein, adequate protein by the end of the week. Analgesia, any patient in pain should be given analgesia, not routinely. Sedation, yes, patient before paralysis, definitely sedation should be given. And always, every day you give a sedation-free vacation. Stop your sedation, stop your muscle relaxation, see what the CNS status is. Thromboprophylaxis, yes, all patients, ICU patients have risk for DVT. And basically, you should have very high doses when you have that, the scoring system, I already told. S is the pressure source, and this is caused many problems recently. Pressure source. So every patient you should turn and see, or ask a sister to see when they are changing morning rounds, morning cleaning summit. You have to ask the pressure sister to see if there are any pressure source and treat that. Bowel movements, usually they move by every third day. It is ICU, usually patients, they open up their bowels. Any line that is not needed, please remove them. And D is de-escalation of antibiotics. Whether it be antivirals also, you can think of de-escalation. Infection control should be optimal. So whether it is antibiotics or antiviral should be optimal. So I think that concludes a very extensive description of critical care management of COVID patients. So if you have any doubts, we can discuss.
Anil sir, ആരെങ്കിലും സംശയങ്ങളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചോദിക്കാം കേട്ടോ.
You can unmute and talk. Unmute and talk.
അൺമ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ ഓപ്ഷൻ കൊടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആരെങ്കിലും ഒക്കെ വീഡിയോയും കൂടി ഓൺ ചെയ്താൽ നന്നായിരിക്കും തോന്നണോ സാർ? ബ്ലാങ്ക് സ്ക്രീനോട് തന്നെ സംസാരിക്കുന്നത് ഒരു ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടായിരിക്കും. സാർ വളരെ ഡീറ്റെയിൽഡ് ആയിട്ടൊരു ക്ലാസ് തന്നെ നമുക്ക് എടുത്തത്. എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നൊരു ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓൺ ആയിരുന്നു, കുറച്ചുകൂടെ നന്നായിരുന്നു എന്ന് തോന്നിപ്പോയി കേട്ടപ്പോ. ആരെങ്കിലും ഒക്കെ ഒന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നെങ്കിൽ നന്നായിരുന്നു. ഇനി നമ്മുടെ വളരെ സീനിയർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള മീന മാഡം ഒക്കെ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. മാഡം ഒന്ന് സംസാരിക്കുമോ മാഡം?
Hello.
പറയൂ മാഡം.
Am I audible?
ഓഡിബിൾ ആണ് മാഡം, പറഞ്ഞോളൂ.
I had some connection problem in between, but the talk was, though it was very extensive, it was excellent. Dr. Anil is always like that. Does 100% justice to the. But many of the doctors are, I think, primary care doctors. They are not accustomed to this high care management. That is why I think everybody is keeping low, not putting any doubts. Could be. This could have been divided into 2-3 sessions, or a hands-on training will be more useful. I think they are planning something like that.
അതെ മാഡം, ഒരു ഇത് കഴിയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് ഒരു ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓൺ മറ്റേ സൂം കഴിയുമ്പോൾ ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓൺ വിചാരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട് മാഡം. അതിന്റെ ഒരു പ്രിലിമിനറി ആയിട്ടാണ്.
I personally invited Dr. Anil to give us hands-on training. He has agreed to do so.
ബാക്കി എല്ലാവരും ചോദിക്കണം.
To use the HFNO device and everything we got 2 days back, we are still to use all these things. Maybe that is the reason.
നമുക്ക് എല്ലാ
actually if you know the basic things, using these devices and applying these principles is easy if you know these values and all. But since we are not focusing on this category C treatment management principles, maybe we can understand these. Let us be aware of these things.
താങ്ക് യു മാഡം. ആരെങ്കിലും, എനിക്ക് മാഡം പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ഞാനൊരു പ്രൈമറി കെയർ വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഡോക്ടറാണ് തൽക്കാലം.
Dr. Anil, can you assess the work of breathing clinically in our ward? We are treating patients. Many of them are slipping into severe desaturating. You are
clinically
methods of assessing the work of breathing.
ക്ലിനിക്കലി നോക്കുന്ന തന്നെയാണ് ഏറ്റവും ഉത്തമം. കാരണം അങ്ങനെയാണ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടതാണ് പറയുന്നത്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ആൻഡ് സി യു ക്യാൻ ഹാവ് നല്ല ആഞ്ഞു വലിക്കും. വളരെ സിമ്പിൾ ആയിട്ട് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ റേറ്റ് വളരെ കൂടുതലായിരിക്കും, പക്ഷെ എടുക്കുന്ന ഓരോ ബ്രത്തും നല്ല ഡീപ്പ് ആയിരിക്കും. അത് വേണം നമ്മൾ നോക്കാൻ. അതാണ് ഏറ്റവും കോമൺ ആയിട്ട് കാണുന്ന വർക്ക് ഓഫ് ബ്രീത്തിങ്. അത് ഈ NIV അല്ലെ HFNC വെക്കാൻ ശരിക്കും കുറയണമെന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. അത് പല പേഷ്യൻസിനും കുറയാറില്ല. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ കുറച്ചു നേരം കൂടെ വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാം. അങ്ങനെ വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്താണ് ഈ പേഷ്യന്റ് സെൽഫ് ഇൻഫ്ലിക്റ്റഡ് ലങ് ഇഞ്ചുറി വന്ന് പിന്നെ ഫർദർ ഡാമേജ് വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പിന്നെ റിക്കവറി ഒക്കില്ല എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ കറക്റ്റ് സമയത്ത് തന്നെ അവരെ അടുത്ത സ്റ്റെപ്പിലോട്ട് മാറ്റണം ട്രീറ്റ്മെന്റിൽ. അപ്പം അത് ക്ലിനിക്കലി തന്നെയാണ്. ടൈറ്റിൽ വോളിയം ഇങ്ങനെ NIV പറയുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് ക്ലിനിക്കലി വളരെ സുഖമായിട്ട് മേക്ക് ഔട്ട്. സ്റ്റെർണോക്ലൂഡർ മസിൽസ് ഒക്കെ ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ആക്റ്റീവ്. എലൈനീസെ പറയുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത്ര നല്ലോണം കാണാം, പക്ഷെ സ്റ്റെർണോക്ലൂഡർ മസിൽ നല്ലോണം കാണാക്കും. ഏറ്റവും സിമ്പിൾ ആയിട്ട് ആഞ്ഞുള്ള വലിയാണ്. യു നോ ഇറ്റ്സ് വെരി ഡീപ് ബ്രെത്ത്സ്. റേറ്റ് എപ്പോഴും കൂടണമെന്നില്ല. ഇന്റർകോസ്റ്റൽസ് എല്ലാം താഴത്തോട്ട് പോകുന്ന കാണാം. പാരഡോക്സും വളരെ അപൂർവ്വം കാണാം. ഒബീസ് പേഷ്യൻസിനൊക്കെ പാരഡോക്സ് കാണാറുള്ളൂ. പക്ഷെ തിൻ പേഷ്യൻസിനൊക്കെ യു ക്യാൻ വെരി വെൽ അപ്രീഷിയേറ്റ് ദാറ്റ് ഇൻക്രീസ് വർക്ക് ഓഫ് ബ്രീത്തിങ് ക്ലിനിക്കലി. അത് കണ്ട് അത് മാറുന്നില്ലെങ്കിൽ അടുത്ത സ്റ്റെപ്പിലോട്ട് പോകണം. അതൊരു ഡേഞ്ചറസ് സൈൻ. വെച്ചാൽ ഇപ്പം വെന്റിലേറ്റർ കൊടുക്കുന്ന പ്രഷർ ആയാലും പേഷ്യന്റ് സ്വന്തമായിട്ട് ജനറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഹൈ പ്രഷർ ആണെങ്കിലും ആ ഡെൽറ്റ, ആ പ്രഷർ ഡെവലപ്പ് ടു ഗെറ്റ് ദ ടൈറ്റിൽ വോളിയം, അത് കൂടിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഡാമേജ് വരുമെന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. ലങ്ങിന് ഫർദർ ഡാമേജ്, ഈ വൈറസ് അല്ലാതെ തന്നെ എക്സ്ട്രാ ഡാമേജ് വരും. അപ്പൊ അതാണ് നമ്മൾ ടേക്ക് കെയർ ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പം മെനി പേഷ്യൻസ് വുഡ് റിമെയിൻ ഇൻഡിക്കേറ്റഡ് ഇൻ ദ ICU എന്നാണ് തോന്നുന്നത്. And how they would come off is, see, many of the doctors would say differ from intubation. അതാണ് നമ്മൾ സ്ഥിരം കാണുന്നത്. ഇപ്പൊ മെഡിസിൻ ICU അവർക്ക് ഇൻഡിബേറ്റ് ആ ഒരു ഡിസിഷൻ എടുക്കാൻ ഇസ് വെരി ഡിഫിക്കൾട്ട്. But I know the care and all those things are very suboptimal nowadays because of staff problem. Trained staff ഇല്ല. അപ്പൊ അതുകൊണ്ട് ഹസാർഡ്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇൻസിഡൻസ് കൂടുതലാണ് ഇൻഡിബേറ്റഡ് പേഷ്യൻസിന്. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു പ്രശ്നമുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ഇതെല്ലാം പറയുന്നത് ഈ ഇൻഡിബേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പെർഫെക്റ്റ് ട്രീറ്റ്മെന്റ് കൊടുക്കണം എന്നുള്ളൊരു ഇതിലാണ് നമ്മൾ ഈ ഇൻഡിബേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുക. ഏർലി ഇൻഡിബേഷൻ പറയുന്നത്. ഏർലി ഇൻഡിബേഷൻ വർക്ക് ഓഫ് ബ്രീത്തിങ് കുറയുന്നില്ലെങ്കിൽ നേരത്തെ തന്നെ ഇൻഡിബേറ്റ് ചെയ്യണമെന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ അതിൽ പ്രശ്നം ഇന്റിബേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒന്നെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു പക്ക ICU വെന്റിലേറ്റർ തന്നെ വേണ്ടി വരും, ICU കിടത്തേണ്ടി വരും. പിന്നെ എത്ര ദിവസം, പിന്നെ അതിന്റെ ബാക്ടീരിയൽ ഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ വരും. അപ്പൊ ഇതെല്ലാം സബ് ഒപ്റ്റിമൽ ആയിട്ടാണ് പോകുന്നത്. ക്ലോസ് സെക്ഷൻ വേണം, സക്ഷൻ ചെയ്യണം, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബ്ലോക്ക് ഒന്നും വരിക്കും, പിന്നെ സെഡേഷൻ വേണം, മസിൽ റിലാക്സൻസ് വേണം. അതൊന്നും ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ മോർട്ടാലിറ്റി ഈസ് ഹൈ ഇൻ ഇൻഡിബേറ്റഡ് പേഷ്യന്റ്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ഡെഫിനറ്റ്ലി ട്രൂ. ബട്ട് ദിസ് ഈസ് വാട്ട് യു ഹാവ് എവിഡൻസ് ഫോർ.
സർ, ഒരു ചാറ്റിൽ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, ഫാമോറ്റിഡിൻ ആണോ പാൻഡോപ്പ് ആണോ ബെറ്റർ?
അല്ല, വി ഡോണ്ട് യൂസ് ഫാമോറ്റിഡിൻ, പാൻഡോപ്രസോൾ തന്നെയാണ് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത്. കമ്പയർഡ് ടു റാനിറ്റിഡിൻ, ദിസ് പാൻഡോപ്രസോൾ ഈസ് മോർ പൊട്ടന്റ് and ranitidine has more incidence of tolerance. അതുകൊണ്ട് പാൻഡോപ്രസോൾ തന്നെയാണ് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത്.
താങ്ക് യു സർ. പിന്നെ ഒരാൾ ചോദിച്ചിരുന്നു,
volume control is to start with.
Madam, that is more safe. That is more safe. Pressure control ഇപ്പം നല്ല വെന്റിലേറ്റർ ആയിട്ട് അറിയാവുന്ന ഒരാൾ എപ്പോഴും അവിടെ മോണിറ്റർ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പ്രഷർ കൺട്രോൾ ഇസ് ഓക്കെ. കാരണം നമ്മൾ ഇറങ്ങാൻ നേരത്തായിരിക്കും പേഷ്യന്റ് ഒന്ന് ബൈറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ നേരത്ത് തന്നെ PI20 വെച്ച് നമ്മൾ ടൈഡൽ വോളിയം 360 വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് ഇറങ്ങുന്നത്. നമ്മൾ ഇറങ്ങുന്ന സമയത്ത് പേഷ്യന്റ് അറിയാതെ ട്യൂബ് കടിച്ചു വെക്കും, വേറെ എന്തെങ്കിലും പ്രശ്നം കൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും ട്യൂബ് കടിക്കുന്നത്, ടൈഡൽ വോളിയം കിട്ടൂല. മറ്റേതിൽ വോളിയം കൺട്രോളിൽ അത് പ്രഷർ ലിമിറ്റിന്റെ അകത്ത് നിന്നോട്ട് കൊടുക്കാൻ ശ്രമിക്കും. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഇതുണ്ടെന്നേ ഉള്ളൂ. ട്യൂബ് ബൈറ്റ് മറ്റൊരു പ്രശ്നം തന്നെയാണ്. ടാർഗറ്റ് ടൈഡൽ വോളിയം അതാണ് ഈ 4 to 8 അല്ലെങ്കിൽ 4 to 6 ml per kg എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിൽ എപ്പോഴും ടാർഗറ്റ് ടൈഡൽ വോളിയം കൊടുക്കാതെ നമ്മൾ റേറ്റ് കൂട്ടി വെച്ചിട്ട് കാര്യമില്ല. ടാർഗറ്റ് ടൈഡൽ വോളിയം ചെന്നാലേ മിനിറ്റ് വെന്റിലേഷൻ വരൂ.
ബേസ് ലൈൻ യൂസേജ് ഓഫ് വെന്റിലേറ്റർ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട് ചാറ്റില്. പക്ഷെ എനിക്കൊന്ന് അതൊരു സെപ്പറേറ്റ് ക്ലാസ് ആയിട്ട് തന്നെ പറയേണ്ടി വരും തോന്നുന്നു.
അതൊരു വലിയ ക്ലാസ് ബൈ ഇറ്റ്സെൽഫ് ആണ്. അത് ബേസിക് മോഡ്സ് ഒക്കെ വേണം പിന്നെ ഒരു ദിവസം എടുക്കാം.
സർ, അത് എനിക്കൊന്ന് ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓൺ ആയിരിക്കൂലേ നല്ലത് അത് പറയാനാണെങ്കിലും?
ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓൺ ഇപ്പൊ ഒരുപാട് പ്രോബ്ലം ഉള്ളതെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഇപ്പൊ മോസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ദ ICUs that we have are COVID positive ICUs. It's very difficult to teach patients with the PPE. അതിന്റെ സംസാരിക്കാനൊന്നും നോക്കൂല. കാരണം വെന്റിലേറ്റർ വെളിയിൽ വെച്ചെല്ലാം പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കാൻ നോക്കുക, അല്ലാതെ ICUന്റെ അകത്ത് കയറി പേഷ്യന്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഡെമോ ചെയ്യാൻ ഭയങ്കര
ഇല്ല സർ, അത് പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല സർ. അല്ലാതെ തന്നെ വെളിയിൽ വെച്ച് വെന്റിലേറ്റർ മാത്രമായിട്ട് പറയാൻ വേറെ ആർക്കെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും ക്വയറീസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചോദിക്കാം. പിന്നെ PPT ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മൾ ഈ സാറിന്റെ ക്ലാസ് വീഡിയോ നമ്മൾ ഷെയർ ചെയ്യാം. വേറെ ആർക്കെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും ചോദിക്കാനുണ്ടോ? ബാക്കി എല്ലാരും സാറിന് താങ്ക് യു പറഞ്ഞേക്കുവാ. അപ്പൊ താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച് സർ. സാറിന്റെ വാല്യുബിൾ ടൈം നമ്മുടെ ട്രെയിനിങ്ങിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഉപയോഗിച്ചതിൽ അപ്പം നമ്മുടെ ജില്ലയിലെ ട്രെയിനിങ് ടീമിന്റെ പേരിലും ഇവിടെയുള്ള എല്ലാ പാർട്ടിസിപ്പൻസിന്റെ പേരിലും പ്രത്യേകം നന്ദി പറയുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു.
ശരി സർ.